Thanks so much, Ashley. As Ashley said, I'm Karen Nadoff.
And I'm Alan Press, and we're from the Shire Law Group right here in Lincolnshire, Illinois. And we're very happy to be here with you today, as I get the slide started there, to present what you need to know when your child turns 18.
So we like getting questions, so please don't hesitate along the way. If we don't answer a question right away, it's because we're probably going to get to it momentarily. And at the conclusion of the presentation, we will stick around to answer any questions that you might have. And if you want to contact us after the presentation, if you think of something after the fact, we'll have our information at the conclusion of the presentation as well, but you can see it up here, 847-955-9000. Or you can simply email us at Karen with a C at shirelawgroup.com or Alan at shirelawgroup.com. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So many of you joining us this evening have rising juniors, and some of you also have seniors. And congratulations to all the families who have seniors. Those seniors are some of them heading to college in the fall, and some of your children might be traveling. Some of your children might be starting a new job, and some of your children might be moving away from home to a dorm or apartment. And most likely it's a combination of a few of these things. But no matter what direction your child is headed in, there is one thing that we all have in common when our children turn 18, and that is now they are considered legal adults. And with that designation comes some important changes for them, for you, and for your family as a whole. And that's what we're going to be focusing on this evening. So we put together this chart for you all, which demonstrates some of the changes between when your child was not a legal adult prior to 18, and then after they become a legal adult at 18 years old. So before 18, you could access your child's medical record. So for example, if you had a question about a vaccine that your child might have, or the vaccination history, you could go ahead and you could call up your child's doctor's office and get that information. After your child turns 18, that right becomes limited. Before 18, you could make decisions about the course of your child's medical treatment. If your child got injured during sports, or they tripped, they fell, they were hurt, you could bring the child into your doctor's office and you could decide on medical treatment on behalf of your child. And after 18, that right becomes limited. Before 18, you could speak to your child's doctor. So if your child was not feeling well, you could call up the doctor's office, speak with the doctor or the nurse. You could tell them the symptoms that your son or daughter had, and then you could decide on a treatment. And after your child turns 18, that right is no longer in place without proper documentation. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Before 18, you could help your child with finances. So if your child had a bank account in their name, and they got a statement that they were a little confused about, you could go ahead and call up the bank on their behalf and try to get that sorted out for them. And after 18, again, that right becomes limited. Before 18, you could have access to your child's educational records. And after 18, that right becomes limited in some circumstances. And we'll focus a little bit on that as well this evening. So what's a parent to do? Well, there's 3 essential documents to be put in place, and we're going to discuss those this evening. Those are healthcare and financial powers. Then we're going to talk about FERPA. FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and that addresses access to your child's educational records. And then we're also going to address some additional common concerns. So when we've done this presentation for the community, people have come to us afterwards and they've asked different questions. And we wanted to include those in tonight's presentation for all of you. And those common concerns include wills and trusts, access to digital assets, dorm, apartment, and global insurance, and health and safety apps. So we're going to discuss all of those as well this evening. But we're going to start with those 3 essential documents regarding healthcare and financial access. And those three documents are a healthcare power of attorney, a HIPAA authorization, and a power of attorney for property. And we're going to take each document one at a time so we can explore each one in more detail. So we're going to start out with the healthcare power of attorney. A parent cannot make medical decisions on behalf of their adult child, even in an emergency, unless proper authorization has been put in place. And that proper authorization is the healthcare power of attorney. The healthcare power of attorney gives parents or a designated individual the authority to make medical decisions on an adult child's behalf. It doesn't eliminate the ability for an adult child to make their own medical decisions. But if something happens to that child and they're unable to make their medical decisions, then the healthcare power of attorney kicks in. An authorization is especially important in the event, again, that your adult child is unable to make his or her own medical decisions. Healthcare power of attorney avoids the expense and aggravation of potentially having to go to court to have the ability to make medical decisions on your adult child's behalf in the midst of a crisis. Going to court is expensive, it's time consuming. If something comes up where you would need to use this healthcare power of attorney, you want it right on hand, so you can use it immediately to make any decisions that you need to make because your adult child is unable to make their own decision at that point in time. I can give you a little bit of an example. My friend had a child who was going to a university, and they wanted their child to get acclimated. So they suggested that their child join some kind of intramural recreational sport. And their child happened to love soccer. So their daughter joined the soccer intramural team. It was a great suggestion. It helped her meet some people. Everything was going well till the end of that week when she was on the soccer field for practice, and she collided with one of her teammates. So after that happened, it was a very bad injury, and she ended up in the university health services. So here she is at school. She's never been away from home before. She is at a new school. She's in an office that she's never been in, a medical facility she's never been in before. And she's with doctors she does not know. And she doesn't really understand or appreciate what the doctors are telling her. She's in a lot of pain. Fortunately, my friend had a power of attorney for healthcare in place, and she was able to send that immediately to that University Health Services Center and be able to make decisions on behalf of her child. So when we do these documents for our adult children, we make sure that electronic copies are also provided. And in a crisis, most likely you're going to be using those electronic copies, and the electronic copies are just as good as having an original or a copy of the original. So the next document, so remember, the power of attorney for healthcare is a decision-making document. Now we're going to switch over to the HIPAA authorization. HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, and it allows healthcare providers to release and share medical information with the people who are designated on the HIPAA authorization, the designated people. They're called authorized recipients. HIPAA allows doctors to speak about a student's or an adult child's medical condition with whomever is designated by that adult child on the authorization. So the HIPAA authorization becomes crucial if your adult child is admitted to a medical facility and you need to get information about their condition, especially if they are not able to speak with you directly about their condition, or they cannot fully relay medical information to you. At a time of crisis, again, your primary concern is to ensure your child is taken care of. You do not need the potential additional burden of court proceedings and associated legal costs in trying to get authority to receive this type of medical information. So I actually have a personal example of this. My son had attended university at a time where there was a virus going around, and he had gotten sick, And like many of you may experience, when your child is at school and they're not feeling well and they call you, you will tell them to go see the doctor, and they will tell you, I can't because I'm too busy. I have class, I have a study group, I have a project, I have plans, or the wait is too long, whatever it might be. So what happened was he got sicker and sicker. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, at the end of the week, I got a phone call, and he said to me, I don't want you to worry. I'm on my way to the emergency room. I have my phone, but it's almost out of battery, but don't worry. I'm with my friend, and my friend is going to keep in touch with you and tell you what's going on. So I said, okay. And, in the meantime, when you get a call like that, your head is racing and you're a little concerned and you're waiting for the next message. So the next message I get is from his friend, who texts me and says, we're at the hospital. David was admitted, but they won't give me any information because I'm not authorized to receive any information. So I quickly called the emergency room and I told them that I was the parent, and they said, we're so sorry. We can't even tell you if your son was admitted without the proper authorization in place. So fortunately, I had the HIPAA authorization. I sent it electronically immediately to the hospital. I called back. The nurse said to me, thank you. Now that we have your HIPAA authorization, we can tell you what's going on. And we appreciate that you sent it to us. If we didn't have it, we wouldn't be able to release that information. So at that point, my son couldn't communicate with me because his cell phone was out of battery. He, of course, didn't bring a charger or think about doing that. So this is one example of how important that HIPAA authorization is. And then if I needed to make any decision on his behalf, because he could not make them himself, I would be able to use the healthcare power of attorney that was in place. So that's how the two work together. So anybody that's named on your healthcare power of attorney should be named on your HIPAA form, because you need information in order to be able to make those decisions.
Thanks, Karen. So we're going to switch over from medical documents like the healthcare power of attorney and the HIPAA authorization form, and we're going to talk about the power of attorney for property. Now, the name is a little misleading because in property, they mean in the broadest sense. So any financial assets, of course, would be included in that definition. So it's not only real estate or real property, but it's also going to be personal property or things like bank accounts, financial matters, all types of things that could be covered that are related to any type of finance. And like the power of attorney for healthcare, this document is going to become very important, especially if your adult child is unable to handle their own financial affairs. So the document allows parents to manage their adult child's finances. It becomes critical if an adult child is injured or ill and is unable either temporarily or permanently to make financial decisions. If you don't have this document in place and your adult child is unable to make their own financial decisions, then like with the medical power of attorney, you're then forced to petition the court to become your adult child's legal guardian. And then that would give you the authority, if you're the guardian of their estate, to make financial decisions on their behalf. This form, having it in place, is going to avoid, hopefully, that problem and allow you to act quickly and without any court permission or intervention. So if a bank account, a car, or any other assets are titled in the name of your adult child, the power of attorney for property is going to avoid the expense and drawn out court process of having a parent appointed as the guardian for the child. Now, there are other ways, of course, to get control of a bank account. Let's say that your adult child has, you might be a joint owner on the account, or your name might be on the account. And of course, that's completely fine. But as they get, gradually older and they start getting assets in their own name, then the power of attorney, of course, can become very important. If an adult child is not readily able to access their bank account and there's an issue, a parent can assist where there's an authorized power of attorney for property. So what are some of the things a power of attorney for property can do? So we've already talked about banking and access to financial accounts. It could also assist with dealing with tax issues. So if a letter comes from the IRS or the Illinois Department of Revenue or any other taxing body, having a power of attorney could be written so the person who's the agent under the power of attorney, let's say that could be you as parents, would have the authority then to respond to that letter or to handle those things. Other things too, like dealing with issues with the Department of Motor Vehicles, the ability to do estate planning. So let's say things turn bad for your adult child and you then felt it was wise to create a will or a trust for them with a power of attorney that gives those powers, you're going to be able to do that for them. So there's lots of things you can put in to a power of attorney for property that are going to be very useful if they're needed. Another big topic, and one that we like to focus in on our firm, is making sure that the issue of digital assets is covered. Because again, you want to make sure, especially with things being online these days, if something were to happen to your adult child and you needed access to an online bank account, or you needed to, shut down their Facebook account because somebody hacked into it and was putting things on the account, this is something that could be used to access those accounts. Now, is it easier if you share the password with your adult child? And the answer to that question would be yes. So you may, as a family, want to consider having some sort of password management system or something in place in case of an emergency. But if that failed or those passwords were not available, then the power of attorney could be used in order to attempt to gain access to those things. So sometimes people ask us, well, what happens if, our adult child after high school is going to attend college and maybe that's going to be out of state? Maybe they're going to go to school in Pennsylvania or Florida or Texas or something like that. Does it make sense to have documents put in place here before they leave? And the answer to that question is yes, because the documents, as long as they're validly executed right here in Illinois, they're going to be valid in all 50 states. So we think it's a great idea to get those done before they leave for school or before they leave for their first job or before they leave home. So because things get awfully busy for them and they may not have the time or inclination to do it later on. So getting them set up now, we think, is a great idea. And again, as long as they're validly executed at the time that they're created and signed, then there's not going to be a problem.
So you can see that putting in place these three documents, the power of attorney for healthcare, the power of attorney for property, and the HIPAA authorization, is about peace of mind, because it's going to allow you to make immediate decisions. And it gives you access to critical information, like through the HIPAA, if a crisis occurs, and it allows you to focus on the situation at hand. These documents are easy to put in place. They should be among the top of everyone's list once your child is 18. They are now legal adults. And copies of the document should be kept in a safe or an easily accessible place. Again, you can use those electronic copies if you need to send them off to any particular place or doctor's office.
And Karen, I did forget to mention that the power of attorney for property could also be designed to be used for convenience as well as incapacity. So let's say it's not a situation where your adult child is incapacitated or unable to handle their own financial affairs. Maybe they're just traveling abroad for junior year and they're not available and things need to get done back here at home. If the power of attorney is designed properly, then that document could also be used to handle financial affairs, even if the child is not incapacitated in any way.
It's a nice feature of the power of attorney for property, for sure.
Definitely.
So now we're going to switch over to FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And this goes back to the fact that once your child becomes a legal adult at 18, your access to their educational records might be limited. The next chart's going to show us some of those limitations. So prior to 18, you could review and view your child's educational records. And after 18, without the proper authorization in place, that is not necessarily so. Prior to 18, you could request a correction to your child's educational records. And after 18, again, that right may be limited without the proper authorization in place. Prior to 18, you could decide who can see your child's educational records. And after 18, that right may be limited without the proper authorization in place. And prior to 18, when your child became a legal adult, you could get photocopies of your child's educational records. And after 18, that right becomes limited without the proper authorization in place in circumstances. So what is this without the proper authorization in place all about? It's all about written consent. So when we do we have a program for our young adults, we always make sure that we also include a FERPA authorization, which is the written consent. And these get sent to the registrar's office. Depending on where your child might be headed to college, for those of you who have children that are going to be on their way, they might have already checked off a box somewhere that already consented, had the FERPA authorization in place without even realizing it. Some schools have them, some schools don't. So the best thing to do is to call the school and see if there is a FERPA authorization in place. And if there's not one in place, then you should put one in place so you can have access to their educational records. There's a lot of misunderstanding about FERPA authorizations, and people think it's just about accessing grades. It is far more important than that. For example, if your child is having a tough time at school and they talk to an administrator about that, and that administrator is concerned about what the conversation was, without the FERPA authorization in place, they would not be able to communicate those concerns to you. So FERPA is the entire educational records. It's not just about grades. It's far more important than that. So as I said at the top of the presentation, we wanted to bring some common concerns to you this evening that we have been asked about when we do this presentation. And those common concerns are wills and trusts and access to digital assets, which Alan is going to cover. And then I'm going to talk a bit about dorm, apartment, and global insurance and health and safety apps.
Thanks, Karen. So wills and trusts for young adults. So, healthcare and financial powers of attorney, the HIPAA form that we've already discussed, are one essential element of estate planning. Wills and trusts are another. But the question becomes, does an 18-year-old need to have a will? Do they need to have a trust? And of course, the answer to that question is going to be, it depends. So if they have their own assets and those assets are somewhat substantial, it may make sense at this time to have a will or a trust put into place. If that's not the case, or let's say that the child does have significant assets, but they're not only in their name, so they're joint accounts with you or with other family members, then they may not necessarily need to have a will or trust in place at this time if their situation isn't more complicated than that. So first, let's go back up a little bit and talk about what is a will and what is a trust. So a will is a document that, you may commonly know it as if I have a will, my will says if I pass away, I leave everything to my spouse. And if she is predeceased me, then I want everything to be divided equally among my children. So that would be a common scenario for someone who creates a will. A will is only effective at the time of death. It has no effect during lifetime. And that's a very important distinction because the other documents that we talked about already, the power of attorney for property and the power of attorney for healthcare, those documents are actually only effective during lifetime. So together, the powers of attorney and the will are going to cover lifetime and cover death. Now let's take a look and see what a trust is. A trust is a document like a will that's written, and it can do the same thing. We can put in there when I die, I want to leave everything to my spouse, and then if she predeceased me, I want to leave everything to my kids. But a trust can be effective immediately upon signing. So a trust can be effective during life and after death. So it's a great document for not only handling things at death, but also handling things during a disability or incapacity. So it's kind of like a super document that covers both life and death. So, does your adult child need either one of these? Well, you want to ask yourself, does your adult child have a significant amount of assets? And then the second question would be, how are they titled? Are they just assets that are owned in their own name? Well, if they passed away, then those assets would most likely need a will or a trust to make sure that they're distributed in the right way. But they could have other types of mechanisms to avoid that issue. That could be like a payable on death designation. It could be owning assets jointly with you or with other individuals. If you own assets jointly and one joint owner passes away, the other joint owner or owners will then automatically, by operation of the way the account is titled, become the automatic owners of those properties. And the other thing to consider would be beneficiary designation. So if an asset has a beneficiary designation, let's say like an IRA or a life insurance policy, well, that's a contract that the owner has with the, let's say, life insurance company to pay the money out to a particular beneficiary or beneficiaries at the time of death. So there's no need to have a will or a trust to cover those assets because they're going to be distributed in accordance with the beneficiary designation. So you can see there's lots of nuances to this, but the rule of thumb would be that if there are significant assets in the name of the child, then you probably want to talk to an attorney about whether or not they would need a will or a trust, like the powers of attorney in the HIPAA form and everything else that we're talking about today. The child does need to be 18 years of age prior to signing any of those documents. It's kind of funny because we get a lot of clients that come in for this program on their 18th birthday because they're eager to get it in place right away. So, and the last thing I wanted to talk about was, again, digital assets. Just very important to address this issue, not only during life through the powers of attorney, but if you do create a will or a trust, you want to make sure that those powers are also with the executor under a will or with the successor trustee under a trust to make sure that the individuals who are going to be in control of things, if something were to happen, are going to have access to those different types of assets.
The next thing that we wanted to discuss is insurance. So things happen, and you should think about insuring yourself with dorm, apartments, or rental, or if your child is going to be traveling, global travel insurance. And surprisingly, the insurance is not as expensive as you would think. You can buy standalone policies to insure apartments, rental, dorm, or you can also check your homeowners and see what the terms of your homeowners is. It might address this type of renter's insurance, but the deductible might be so high that a standalone policy makes more sense. So you have to do a little bit of research when it comes to this. We don't endorse one policy over another, but we do feel like putting this on your checklist with all the other dozens of things on the checklist is definitely worthwhile. And I, again, can give you a personal example why. My daughter went to school in the middle of Pennsylvania. It gets very, very cold during the winter. And we had told both my children before they went to school, to college, that they should make sure that they never leave their computer anywhere because unfortunately things happen. And as you all know, their world is on their computer, especially when they're going to classes. Everything's on there, all their assignments, what they're working on, notes, everything. So we had told both of them, make sure that if you go to study someplace or you put your computer down, you take it with you if you're going to leave. So this very cold day in winter, my daughter packed up her backpack with her computer, piled on all of her clothes, and headed to the library to her favorite spot where she liked to study. So she got to the library, she's studying, she's hungry. Unlike me, and I don't know about all of you, but when we were hungry, we couldn't get food delivered. However, my children were able to do that through Grubhub and whatever other delivery services there were. So she called out, she got her food delivered to the library, and she had remembered that we had said to her, don't leave your computer. So she took her computer, she went down to get her food. When she came up to her spot in the library, her very warm coat was gone. So she was upset because number one, her coat had been taken. And number two, it was the middle of winter and she was going to be freezing cold until we had figured out how we were going to get her a replacement. Fortunately, we had insurance that covered theft. And all she had to do was go and file a police report, and we could submit that to the insurance company, and then they would pay out for an equivalent cost for a replacement. And it was relatively quick that we were able to get her a new coat. But sometimes this insurance covers not only theft, but it also covers accidental damage. There's a lot of different terms in there. Again, just check out these different policies, check out your homeowner, see which one makes a little bit more sense for you. Definitely something to look into. It's very expensive if you have to replace something, and the cost of the insurance might just make it worthwhile for you to have a policy in place.
Karen, we do have a question. I think it's relating back to the documents that we talked about up front. What do you do after the child is out of college? Are these documents still going to be useful, or are they going to need to do them new ones all over again?
Yep. So these documents can remain with your child. If at some point, say on the HIPAA authorization, they want to name an additional person, or they want to change their agents or the people that they've said can step in on their behalf, who's authorized to make decisions for them, then they would make new ones. And the new ones that they make would then terminate the old ones. We always recommend that, these should not be stale. So if a significant amount of time has passed, then that's a time where they might want to update them. Or maybe if they've relocated permanently to another state, they might want to execute the documents for that particular state. But these documents are good in all 50 states. We actually state that in our documents, but they are good in all 50 states.
Yeah, and they don't have an expiration date technically. Karen's right. They do get stale after, maybe 10 years or so. Then, the bank might be suspect or might question whether or not it's still valid or has it been replaced. But, typically we do see young adults making new ones when they have a major life change, right? So they wind up getting married. They no longer want mom or dad on the form, and they want to put their significant other on there. That's typically going to be a good time to do a brand new one. But they don't have to. It's good. Just because college is over doesn't mean that the form expires. It's going to be good into their young adult life, and really for as long as they want it to be valid. So.
But one way to terminate them is just to make a new one.
That's correct. Yep.
The other thing we wanted to bring to your attention is this medical ID app. Now, this is not just for your adult children. This is for everybody in your family. And if you don't already know about this, we just wanted to highlight it for you. If you have an iPhone, you will see this white icon box with the red heart in it. If you have a different type of smartphone, you can download a very similar app. And the medical ID app allows first responders to bypass a lock screen, whether it's a code or facial recognition, and to get right into whatever information is placed within that medical ID app. This is especially important if you have an allergy to a medicine or to different foods, or there's some type of condition that a first responder would need to know of. So there's a lot of information you can put in the medical ID app. You can put as much as you like in there. Just be aware that it's there. If it's something that you feel would be useful for you or for members of your family, then certainly they can go ahead and they can make sure that they put that information in there. And first responders are trained to look for the medical ID app and see if there's any information contained in there. We also wanted to talk about safety apps. This is a question we often get. There are a plethora of safety apps. You can go and Google and a whole bunch of them will come up. You want to make sure that you vet them. And the best way to find good safety apps is to ask either your trusted friends or have your children ask their trusted friends and see what's going to work for you and your family. Like we use Life 360 and Find Friends. Those are common ones. You could follow an Uber ride, you can follow a walk. So whatever is going to make sense for your family, the safety apps are just another additional thing to think about and to put in place to give you a little bit of peace of mind.
Thanks, Karen. We're also going to talk about planning remotely. So it looks like we're kind of coming out of the woods with COVID, hopefully, and things are kind of getting back to normal. But we are still able to do these documents online. And we've set up an entire system to enable this to kind of get, the student would fill in some information on an online secure portal. We get the information and prepare the documents, and then we're able to share them online, kind of like we're sharing this PowerPoint, and explain all of the documents, and then have them sign actual paper copies that would be sent to them in advance. So planning remotely now is a great opportunity to get this done. We do find that things get awfully busy in late July and early August before adult children are leaving for school, if they're going to school, or they're moving into a new apartment or whatever they're doing. So as long as they're 18, now is a great time to get this done. The documents that we talked about today, the powers of attorney for property and the powers of attorney for healthcare are available online. They're statutory forms. However, we at Shire Law Group, we customize those forms, and we also, add additional powers and make them a little bit more hardy. And then we also, of course, spend the time to review them with the adult child. And then finally, we also make sure that they are executed, witnessed, and notarized properly in accordance with the statute. So that's something that if you're a do-it-yourselfer, you want to make sure that you're doing that correctly so the forms are going to be valid. If you don't have these documents in place for your adult child or children, this is the time to address the importance of putting them into place. You want to ensure that you, your family, and your adult children are protected with proper powers of attorney and healthcare directives that are going to provide for substantial powers upon which their agents, which of course may be you, can act on their behalf. The importance of pre-planning to avoid a crisis cannot be overstated. You can't create these documents once it's too late. So having them drawn up in advance and putting them into a drawer and, having comfort in knowing that they're completed in case you ever needed to use them, that's really worth a lot, especially when you may have your children leaving home and starting their young adult life, either at school or at work or new apartment or whatever the case may be. So it's really a great time to get it taken care of, because if it's too late, then it's going to be too late. And then you might be stuck with the proposition of having to go to court to be appointed their legal guardian.
Some of the most important gifts that you can protect your adult child with are that power of attorney for healthcare. So when your child is unable to make their own medical decisions, you can step in and make those for them. A HIPAA authorization, so you can get information, medical protected information about your adult child. The power of attorney for property, so you can help out with their financial affairs, like Alan said, for convenience, if it's drafted that way, and certainly upon incapacity if something was to happen. The consent form to access educational records, that's that FERPA authorization. And again, that would be housed with the registrar. So for those who have children that are going to college, again, you want to check in with the registrar, see if there is a particular FERPA authorization for that particular college. And if not, make sure that you get a FERPA authorization in place for your child. Wills or trust, if advisable, as Alan spoke about this evening. Insurance, check it out. Check out your homeowner's insurance policy, check out standalone policies, see what's going to work best. And finally, that medical ID, if it's something that you think would be useful, then go ahead and if you have the iPhone, you can just locate it on your home screen. If you have a smartphone, just download a similar medical ID app and put whatever information in there would be useful. And then, of course, safety apps. Just make sure that you vet those and ask around and see which ones are working and what's going to work for your family.
And then Karen, we had a couple of questions. One was just how much does Shire Law Group charge? We charge, as a service to the community, we just charge $300, and we do the first 4 forms listed here. So we do the power of attorney for healthcare, the HIPAA authorization, a power of attorney for property, and then the FERPA authorization form as well. We, like I said, we have an online portal. We make the process very easy. And then there's another question, sorry if I missed it, but can the documents be scanned and emailed, or do you need to access to hard copies? Should you have multiple hard copies?
Yep. So electronic copies are just as good as an original or a copy. So when we do these for our client, we do electronic copies as well. If you're going to be doing them through the statutory forms, you want to make sure you have electronic copies because they're going to be accepted. And in the middle of a crisis, you are going to want those electronic copies. So I have mine on my desktop. And if I need them, I know where they are and I can immediately send them out. So you don't need to have multiple copies. You can always give the medical center at the University Health Center the power of attorney for healthcare if you want to. Sometimes these colleges have their own forms that they want you to fill out if it's a particular facility that your child might be at that's under the umbrella of that particular university. But certainly having your power of attorney for healthcare for your child in the University Health Services system is going to be helpful. That would be a different answer for your power of attorney for property. You just do not want to hand those power of attorney for property out. That's a different situation. So for financial matters, that's something that if you went to a bank and you needed it, you would have it with you, or you could, send it to them. And if for some reason these powers of attorney are updated, especially for the ones that are out there that are now older, you want to kind of note where you've given those power of attorney for property out so you can then update them if there's an update to them at a later time.
Yeah, because a financial institution cannot be held liable if you revoked or changed the power of attorney and you failed to tell them about that. So if they have the old one on file, you have to let them know. That's why you only want to hand that out when you have to. Let's see, we got something else here too. Yes, so the $300 per child. What about multiple births like twins? Unfortunately, yes, $300 per child. So we do the same amount of work for each child. So yes, it's that if you have 2 children, it would be $600. That's correct.
But for each child, obviously, you're going to get all the documents. You're going to get the electronic copies, the originals, and the copies, and they can either have their own signing meeting, or sometimes if it's more convenient, we can do it together. It will just take longer because we want to, part of this is we want these adult children to appreciate what they're signing. One of the lessons that we try to tell them is always know what you're signing, always read what you're signing. So we take a lot of time to go through them, make sure they understand them, make sure that they are asking good questions and getting their answers.
And then for POAs and HIPAA, they do before 18 or after?
Everything has to be done on their 18th birthday or later. So they have to be adults to sign these documents. That's why, like Alan said, we have some of these young adults on their birthday meeting with us, which we always like. And after that point, at any point after 18, but they do have to wait until their 18th birthday. But I will say also that we often have people who say to us, my child's going to turn 18 on this date. Can you get the documents all ready? And we have everything all ready to go. So we're prepared for that day.
Yes, we just calendar that on our system, and then we'll reach out to you like a week or so before they're 18. Also, remember too that the adult child is actually going to be the client. So even though you as parents probably get to pay for this service, they are the ones who are our clients. So we have like a little retainer agreement, and we make it a very pleasant experience because we understand this is probably their first, especially if they're just turning 18, their first time that they're interfacing with an attorney. and we want to make sure that they get a positive experience, and you as parent or parents would also have a positive experience with this as well. Let's see if there's anything else. All right, I don't see any other questions. We're happy to answer any more for you, or if you think of something afterwards, you can see our email addresses are on the bottom of the screen. Please feel free at any time to reach out to Karen or myself, and with any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Yep, do not hesitate. We'd rather get the questions and be able to answer them. These are important documents, and we just want to make sure that any questions that come up after the fact that you're able to get some quick answers to.
Excellent. As always, if I have to meet with a lawyer, especially for the first time, I'm sure you guys would be the most kind. So thank you for your time. And here's all of their contact info. Don't be shy to reach out. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to put this on YouTube. So, you know, if you don't remember something or it comes into your mind in the middle of the night, oh, what did they say? I'll post it on YouTube. I'll send it out to you if you registered. And please feel free to share it with your friends and family. And yeah, thanks for everything and have a great night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ashley.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. We appreciate it. Good night now.
Night, everybody.